Week, the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster gave a briefing where they were outlining just what the strategies that they've been employing in dealing with crime in the country are. Police Minister Bheki Cele, also one of those who tried to give assurances to South Africans that they have the situation under control. Yesterday, we had the Institute for Security Studies releasing a policy review, in particular focusing on the murder rate in the country. And what it shows is, of course, that the murders that are taking place in the country are not only high, but they're highest that they have been in 20 years. And it also pushes us to look closer at what is happening in the provinces with the individual provincial murder rates to further understand what is fueling these figures. Joining us for this conversation today is David Bruce, who is an independent researcher and consultant at the Institute for Security Studies. David, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to listeners.
We'll also be joined in this conversation by Lieutenant General Tebello Musigidi, who is the Deputy National Commissioner for Policing. We'll let you know as soon as she is on the line. So, David, firstly, I want to start with your approach to this policy brief that you've put together and why it is that you are now saying that in order to fully understand the murder trends of the country, we shouldn't just look at the national numbers and what those national figures are telling us, but that we should dig deeper and understand the context of the individual provinces.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. Well, in this case, it's quite clear because, what we just wanted to do was to understand a bit more about what's behind the murder rate in South Africa. And so, the background to this is that the murder rate has increased steadily since 2011. So, in 2011, we had a rate, a per capita rate, that's the rate per 100,000 members of the public of 29.5 per 100,000. And since then, it's gone up to 45 per 100,000. In terms of the actual number of murders, what that means is that murder has actually gone up from something like 15,500 murders to 27,500 murders. So looked at in terms of the actual number of murders, that's an increase of 77%. That's a very dramatic increase. But we wanted to just look at it in relation to the rate of murders, which is the rate per 100,000, which means that you can compare a province with a very large population to a province with a much smaller population and see, and use that as a comparative basis for, examining which ones are doing worse and which are doing better. And the picture that emerges from that is very striking because there's 4 provinces that have experienced very dramatic increases in murder since 2011. And so if you, trying to understand why murder has increased in South Africa in the last 11 or so years, then it isn't a uniform pattern. It's in these 4 provinces that murder has increased and that have basically driven this major increase in murder that has taken place, as I say, since 2011.
Some of the dramatic increases that we see are coming out of KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. Why do you believe that this is? What are the trends telling us there?
Right, okay. Well, maybe just as a preface to that, can I just say that then, what the analysis that we did shows is that the province which has experienced the greatest increase since 2011 is KwaZulu-Natal, but the Eastern Cape has also had undergone a comparable increase, a similar increase to that in KwaZulu-Natal in terms of the rate of murder. But for a long time, the Eastern Cape has been the province with the highest per capita rate of murder. And so the Eastern Cape is now very distinctively the province with the highest rate of murder in the country. So after that is KwaZulu-Natal, and then the Western Cape is also one of the three provinces with the highest rates of murder. So just that's an important thing to bear in mind. And the other province that has also undergone a major increase in levels of murder, along with KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape, is Gauteng.
The Deputy National... Go ahead, David.
Well, you're asking a question about why these murder rates are increasing. And, what we're essentially saying is that if we're partly talking obviously about government and the police here, want to respond to these problems more effectively, we need to understand more clearly what is going on in the country. And part of it is just, identifying where it is that the murder rate is increasing most dramatically. So, I mean, also, it's not necessarily it isn't a uniform problem across all of these provinces. To some degree, within each of these provinces, where murder is increasing, it's within specific areas that it has increased. And so, for instance, if you look at the kind of murder situation in the country, we have 100 and I think it's something like 1,161 police stations in the country at the moment, but less than 10% of those, or roughly 10%, I think it's 132 of those stations account for 50% of the murders. And if if one's looking at the 30 stations with the highest numbers of murder in South Africa, those account for 20% of murders in South Africa. So there's something like 5,000 murders that took place over the last year, merely in those 30 station areas. And all of those 30 station areas are in these four provinces: KwaZulu-Natal, the Western Cape, Gauteng, and the Eastern Cape. And so essentially what you would want to understand is, what is happening in these kinds of areas that's driving these dramatic increases in murder.
All right. Thanks for that, David. Let me bring into the conversation the Deputy National Commissioner for Policing, Lieutenant General Siphelele Ngobese. Commissioner, you've heard part of what David has had to say there, breaking down the murder rate to provinces, but also pinpointing some of the hotspot areas in those provinces and saying that's part of where we need to be focusing our attention. As the police, the analysis that you run on these figures and you understand of what's happening in provinces, what is happening that is driving the murder rates, let's say in the Eastern Cape, in KwaZulu-Natal, in Gauteng, and in the Western Cape?
Thank you very much, Cathy, and very good morning to yourself. Very good morning to the team. Yes, Cathy, I had part of what the professor have alluded to in respect of the crime analysis and the identification of the hotspot areas, which is what the South African Police Service has been communicating when we communicate even our crime stats, where we do that crime hotspot analysis, so that we are able to, if possible, pump more resources. This is the 4 provinces that is on the priority list of the South African Police Service. And if you look at the number of resources, be it physical or human, this is where we are taking resources to make sure that we stabilize those particular areas that are crime hotspots. As to the question of what attributes to this high murder rate, it differs from time to time. When we do the crime analysis, the analysts will indicate whether the high number of murders happen at which areas and what could be the contributing factors in terms of the weapon of choice that it's prevalent in the state area, as well as what would be the victims, what are the perpetrators, as and when we do arrest, we do those analysis and identification, so that when we put on the strategies and when we identify the resources that need to go to these areas, we do them out of that particular analysis.
When we look at the provinces and just how they're populated, right? A province like the Eastern Cape, that records among sort of the lower numbers when it comes to the size of its population, but the criminality that is taking place there, in particular the murder rate, is so much higher than other provinces that have bigger populations. What have you understood to be driving that?
What we have identified through the analysis, especially in the Eastern Cape, as you are rightfully indicating, that in terms of the population size, it's less, and you will recall, or we know as the country, that between the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape, we have that particular migration of people or the society that will, in certain times of the year, they will be in Gauteng or in the Western Cape, and they will move into the Eastern Cape during the period like the one that we are getting to. And what we have also identified is most of the time there will be the revenge that happens, but Eastern Cape is one of the provinces that we have also identified the number of gangs that are operating in that particular area, where you get the number of group of young people that are likely to commit these crimes that we are referring to, your attempted murder and murder or violent crimes. Of late, we have also picked up the issues of kidnappings that are becoming problematic in the Eastern Cape.
The call has been placed on hold. Please wait.
All right. I'm not sure what is happening there with the line to the Commissioner. David, let me bring you in there. She mentions the issue of gangs in the Eastern Cape that are that are ongoing, that are an ongoing concern, and kidnappings that are happening there. When I look at the crime statistics just over sort of the last year, the increase in kidnappings we've also seen in the Western Cape. Gangs, of course, historically would be notorious in the Western Cape, not necessarily the Eastern Cape. So what do you make of that phenomenon?
Right. Well, you see, again, I would just reiterate the point that, and I think it was in some ways confirmed by the response provided by Lieutenant General Mohlahlana. But is that, what we need to do is make more of an effort to understand much more clearly what's going on and what's shaping, why has a province like the Eastern Cape had such a high murder rate for such a long time, and why has it increased most dramatically? In terms of the information which I have access to, some of the points that have emerged for me is, the one thing that is, if one's talking about the comparison between the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape, the one thing that's very different between them is that in the Western Cape, a very high proportion of murders are linked to the city of Cape Town itself, to the Cape Town metropolitan area. So you've got something like 77% of murders in the Western Cape are linked to, take in the last year took place in Cape Town. And, gangs are quite a significant contributing factor to those murders, contributing to maybe 20 or 25% of those murders. In the Eastern Cape, on the other hand, and this is the SAPS's own figures, so I think the SAPS figures for the Eastern Cape were that gangs contributed to something like 4% of the murders, and so there is a gang phenomenon in the Eastern Cape, but that's almost entirely concentrated in the Nelson Mandela Bay area. And so what's very different about the Eastern Cape is that the problem of murder isn't simply related to the metropolitan areas. It seems to be much more dispersed, much more related, is in some ways a rural phenomenon, or linked to some of the kind of smaller towns in the province. And so beyond that, some of what the SAPS's own data reveals is that the one thing that seems to play quite a substantial role, possibly contributing to as much as 10% or maybe even more of murders in the Eastern Cape is vigilantism. But then the main driver of murder in the Eastern Cape would be appear to be various types of disputes. There might be disputes between individuals. There might be disputes between groups of people. They might involve things like stock theft and things like that. But what we're basically arguing is that without much better information, much better understanding of the murder situation in each of the provinces, and particularly the provinces where murder is very high, we're unlikely to be able to respond to these problems effectively.
All right. That is the voice of David Bruce. Lieutenant General Musikidi is back on the line. We'll continue the conversation after the latest 10:30 news headlines.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAfm.
We're looking at the high crime rates in the country, but focusing specifically on the murder rate and some of what the trends are showing there in helping us understand what is happening in provinces, but also how can this then better help inform the police's strategies, crime-fighting strategies in different parts of the country. Lieutenant General Siphelele Ngobese is with us. David Bruce, an independent researcher and consultant for the ISS, also with us. Siphelele Ngobese is a senior researcher at the South African Cities Network. She's also on the line. Siphelele, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and thank you for having me.
All right, great. I'll give you a chance just to weigh in on the conversation shortly. Lieutenant General Ngobese, I want to check with you, this issue of the police really trying and needing to understand what the driving factors behind these high murder trends and other crimes that are being committed. Do you believe that you as the police have an understanding of what those issues might be, especially given the fact that some of those issues could well arise from social conditions? But for now, what do you understand to be behind them?
Thank you again, Cathy. I believe and I want to believe that even the analysis that will come from our partners, they will know that we partner with them in some of the areas, such as your crime statisticians that we are having within the organization, the analysts that we have deployed, who are specialists. They were deployed with the specialized skills to come and assist the department. We also have deployed or established a unit of research, which from time to time we go and we deploy them to get us this reason, so that when we draft our strategies, we draft the informed strategies that will then mean if we have to get other departments that need to partner with us to address what you have rightfully indicated, which are social ills, we do that, and we also involve the local municipalities in terms of what they need to do to assist the crime fighting. The recent strategy that we have communicated, that was presented and adopted by Cabinet, was looking at the whole of government approach, including the active citizenry, in terms of us having to deal with the issues of crime. So my answer to you is that yes, with all this expertise that we have deployed as the South African Police Service, that is the reason why we were trying to understand what could be the issues that are impacting and that are making the crime rates to rise, so that when we appoint, when we train our members as well, we train them in accordance with what they will be dealing with that is a reality on the ground.
So what I'm asking, Commissioner, is that you tell us what it is that you as the police have found. You know, it's great that you have a research unit. So what has it said about what is, you know, the causal factors for these murder rates?
One area that one will stress, which is on the high, that is the issues of the social ill, it's the intolerance. In your KwaZulu-Natal area, you get where the family will be wiped off because of the previous conflict that will have happened between the families. You have the political intolerance in that area, in that space. When you go to the Eastern Cape, as I've alluded earlier, that come this time where people are moving back, it's the issues of the revenge, that they will go there and revenge on their previous or even the previous family disputes that could have happened. And now it's the time that others need to pay off, including even the disputes between, you know, friends that might have fought somewhere, and the liquor is one of the areas that is contributing to the murders that we are having. We are having problems of the abuse of this substance, and people then become violent when they need to resolve the matters that they might be in conflict or not understanding each other on.
All right. Siphelele, let me perhaps come to you and give you a chance to bring in your own perspective from the South African Cities Network. Of course, you know, crime has significant impacts for the ability of cities to roll out services, to be functioning administrations that can attract investment, that can lead to some form of growth, whether it's infrastructure or just really the general upkeep of the city.
Definitely, Cathy. I think it's important to note that, you know, there's a distinct urban character of crime, and I think that's captured in the policy brief, for example, that eThekwini accounts for about 43% of murders in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. That's reflective of the national picture, where the 9 cities that we study account for about 50% of murders nationally. And so it tracks. And then it becomes very important then to think about it in terms of developmental outcomes, the ability of cities to meet their responsibility to drive a productive economy so that they can, drive shared growth, inclusive growth, sustainable development, human development, and well-being outcomes, because it's important for life in cities to also be equitable, to be inclusive, and for cities to be livable and safe. And the safety element and the rates of violence and crime directly preclude that. So then safety and violence and crime prevention also becomes a developmental question. It's not just something that's separate or incidental that happens, something that directly checks our ability for cities to really meet the object of local government, particularly metropolitan local government, which has a bigger responsibility than just the mechanical delivery of services. And so when you have high rates of violence and crime, you have unsafety. It means that you cannot have economies that are running at the optimum scale so that everyone can access employment, everyone can live in the city, living a decent life in the city. And so it's very important to really correlate our rates of violence and crime and our rates of murder. And murder is a great proxy for understanding violence and crime more generally. And something that very much has to do with what we are able to achieve in our cities.
All right. David, I want to bring you in here again and just ask the question, you of course, as part of this policy brief, have also made a couple of recommendations, but I think at the heart of it really is trying to say that, there's more that can be done, and perhaps there are things that can be done differently from the side of the police in tackling the high crime levels that we're seeing, more specifically the high murder rate. And I want you to explore mostly on this concept of using a one-size-fits-all approach to crime in the country and the need for it to be differentiated based on what the numbers and the data is saying.
Right, okay. Well, so if one's looking at, currently where things stand in terms of our understanding of, what's shaping these murder rates, what's driving them. I mean, for many years, it's been the established understanding, and a lot of the data has supported the understanding that a lot of murders are linked to disputes of one kind or another between people who are often known to each other. There's often alcohol involved and so on. But one of the things that has clearly shifted in South Africa in the last decade or so has been the entrenchment and growth of organized crime. And so, one of the questions which, analysts are asking is, to what degree is it organized crime itself that is now playing a role in contributing to these escalating levels of murder. So, for instance, if we're talking about firearms playing more of a role in murder, particularly, for instance, in a province like KwaZulu-Natal or Gauteng or the Western Cape, to what degree is the proliferation of firearms linked to organized crime? And so, partly this is, something that one would, possibly be able to look to analysts to answer. But, one of the implications is that, and it, is a question that was raised in part by the unrest in July in 2021 was about the South African Police Service Crime Intelligence Division. So, it seems that, if we were to have a much clearer picture about the role of that organized crime is playing in South Africa, the contribution of organized crime to murder, then we would need to be getting, I think, much clearer information from the Crime Intelligence Division, and and one of the ways, one of the steps that we need to take is clearly to considerably strengthen and even overhaul the Crime Intelligence Division, because, the indications are that, it's not serving the role playing the role that we needed to play in terms of, helping to provide the type of information that we need to get on top of these kinds of problems.
Commissioner Musekedi, I want you to come in there, because again, when we think about what the experience of of the residents of this country is when it comes to crime. Often there is a view that the police don't know what they're doing, that there isn't a clear strategy, which is why we see the criminals seemingly having the upper hand. And the crime intelligence and organized crime are really some of the big areas where these gaps, I think, become exacerbated.
Cathy, I want to take us back to 2016-17, where the South African Police Service Detective Services did the analysis and identified that particular shortcoming of the emerging violent nature and organized nature of committing crime, and thus, as a department, there was the resuscitation of the organized crime at the first levels or first entrance into the organized crime space, hence the establishment of the units that we have them in each province, including at head office. We do have organized crime units over and above the serious organized crime that is within the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation, which is commonly known as the Hawks. On the issues of the crime intelligence, of recent days, we've been communicating as well the successes that we managed to intercept some of your very serious, organized in the space of CIT in amongst others and your kidnapping cases. Yes, it is correct that we have identified the shortcoming within the crime intelligence space, and as a result, there was an appointment. Since the appointment of the National Commissioner, we did appointed the head of the crime intelligence, and in recent days, to look into the restructuring of that environment to make sure that we have at least people that will not that the ones that are there are not police enough, but we cannot continue on receiving these challenges that we are not doing enough. We are saying, can we turn the tide and look at different ways of doing things so that we are not doing things that we did before that resulted in or we did not give us a different result. So that overhaul, the capacitation of the crime intelligence, and you can see with the results in recent days that it is gradually yielding the successes in the space of crime intelligence, including how we get. And we are also looking at how better we can strengthen it, better than where it is now, to make sure that we have a proper counterintelligence that will give us intelligence before crime is committed, because we are concerned as well as the organization. And the adoption of what I referred to earlier, the strategy, including the Operation Chanela that we have deployed, we're gradually seeing the change in which a crime is being committed and the number of successes that are coming in, including where even the correctional services came to us to complain that we do not have enough space anymore. So it is not about arresting people and putting them in jail anymore. It is the issue of how do we then change the mindset and the social ease that we're having so that people do not commit crime. I mean, the issues of overhauling of the crime intelligence, it is what is on the top of our agenda to make sure that we do receive it.
So just for clarity, Commissioner Musikidi, Correctional Services said you're arresting too many people.
No, the space to keep the people, it's gradually getting smaller and smaller. The prisons are 44% overpopulated in terms of what they would have planned before that we can be able to carry this much.
So what were they asking you to do about it?
I think it is the whole of the JCPS cluster to look at how do we fast track the processes in the criminal justice system so that people that are in jail are not awaiting trial. It is one of those issues. And those that are first-time offenders to look at the issues of what would be the possible rehabilitation processes that we can deploy as a cluster, as a whole, instead of just populating the prison. What is it? What are the strategies that we can bring forward to make sure that when they are sitting there, when they come out, as we will expect, they come up changed persons?
Okay. Let me go to Durban. Mohammed, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Cathy. Just to compliment you first, as a former editor, your questions are very explorative and well done. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mohammed. Go for it.
Thanks. Okay, I love the rhetoric. I've been listening to your show from the time I jumped into the car. There's a lot of rhetoric. Steps, strategy, analytics, everything has its place. But what does it mean to the man in the streets? It means zero. I've been involved in community police forums for almost 25, maybe 30 years. And we hear the same thing over and over and over again. People are tired. We know there's crime. The crime is far too much. But if you break down the stats and you take it to regions, you'll find there's a different level, a different pattern. Now, if you're looking at KZN, we know we replete with political killings, we replete with issues of gangsterism and drugs and alcohol and all of those things. And we keep on blaming the factors, right? Take the factors away. In terms of what is the state really doing? Now, I'll tell you, I'll just use my police station, for example. We're a small police station that's serving a large community. And we don't have enough vehicles. We don't have enough boots on the ground. We don't have enough detectives. And these logistics play an important role to fighting crime. So they need to look at logistics, and we need to repair the issues of logistics as we move along. So the rhetoric is replete, and it's going to continue for years to come. For another 30 years, when somebody else takes over from me, you're going to have the same conversation. All you need to do is just replay your show, and that's going to be the end of it. And it's, we've got things like community and blue strategy. We're like mini reservists, for example. We got to do the work for the police. The CPF's got to be the eyes and ears, and this information gets passed on. So we have been fortunate at our station where we've seen a reduction in crime over the last two or three months in terms of stats at our last CPF meeting. But again, I just want to emphasize
So Mohammed, just to go a little bit further into what you're saying, are you saying that the problems that you have experienced are coming through on the police's end, that they're leaking some information, they're not working or pulling their end of the stick when it comes to the investigations that are supposed to be done? Where exactly are they going wrong? Because that's information that Commissioner Musikidi, I think, would also be interested in.
It's multifactorial. I'll give you a very simple example. All right, when we discuss the issue of drugs and drug-related issues in the hotbed of one of our jurisdiction areas, we discussed it at a CPF meeting. The very next day, that information was leaked from whichever level. Not my members, and I'm telling you now, not my members. And those same drug dealers then disappeared. So what is really going on? Well, I'm not blaming the police directly as it would be. We have logistical problems, yes, number one. Number two is, there is corruption. Information is going to be leaked. But those kind of things need to be stopped. And we've identified people who are responsible for this. The police are doing their job. Really, they are. They're doing the best they can. I can phone the police station again and say, listen, I need a van, this particular area or that area. They will come out and they will do their work. But more than that, there are deeper factors that need to be looked into and rooted out from the community.
All right, Mohammed, we're going to have to leave it there for this morning. Mohammed is out in Durban. Temba, you're in Mthatha. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy and your guests. I'm an official of the Eastern Cape Department of Education. We are noticing a rise in the kidnapping and killing of teachers in rural schools in the small town of Lusigisigi, about 200 kilos from Mthatha. I don't know what could be the cause of that. When teachers go to school, they are hijacked and killed, and when they come back from school, they are also hijacked. Last Friday, a lady teacher who was teaching in one of our high schools there was kidnapped and shot dead and dumped next to a river. In the same spot where a principal of a junior secondary school was also kidnapped and was also killed. We see that escalation now of targeting of teachers and killing them. I'm just interested in the comments of your colleagues there, your guests. What could be the problem with teachers now? Why are criminals targeting teachers?
Oh, September incredibly concerning. Commissioner, let me give you an opportunity to respond to both Themba and Mohammed.
Thank you once more, Cathy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I think I understood what Mohammed indicated in the fact that they communicate the strategies and the next morning they leak. The question is they leak where? And we've been emphasizing that we root out corruption within. If there is any person that knows this particular individual is the one that is responsible, let that be reported. We're going to look into what can we do more to strengthen our internal corruption investigation capacity that is lying as well within the detective service. Because when you look at what DPCI is doing the HOT, it's your high level of corruption that will also include other departments, but we have built that capacity. So if we can come in and report so that we root out, we have sent a lot of our own that do not belong to the service. But if you cannot work with us, therefore we cannot work with you, look at better options of wearing a different uniform than the one that we are having. And I appreciate that CPF, Cathy, is doing a lot, is assisting us a lot. Hence I was saying the recent strategy is to adopt a whole of government, including partnering with our communities in addressing the root causes of crime. When coming to the issues of Eastern Cape, I have alluded to the fact that some of the issues that we have picked up in the Eastern Cape in the issues of retaliation, revenge, the punishment, the vigilantism is one of the issues that Professor also spoke to, and the argument and misunderstanding. I think the intolerance as well is becoming high, and some of the cases that we have picked up were like the ladies that the Themba, if I'm not mistaken, spoke about. We find that it is the dispute or relationship dispute that happen between the people, and they come back and either kidnap, or some will be in the process of a divorce or the relationship that went sour, and there will be those kidnappings and the murdering of females in the Eastern Cape space. But to this extent that it's becoming prevalent, I think we went to Lusikisiki. I've been to Lusikisiki more than once, and if this is what is being picked up in terms of the teachers, because the numbers as well will tell us how many of this particular group is involved in either in crime, either as victims or as
all right.
Yeah.
All right.
But I think we will continue to do that analysis and check how many are we talking about, but we did pick up some challenges in that space.
Siphelele, do you get a sense that there is this integrated approach, that there is, everybody's moving from the same page, and that the coordination, because ultimately, even if we take a whole of government and a whole of society approach, there has to be that central unit that is driving it from a leadership perspective. Do you get a sense that that is happening?
What we've observed, Cathy, is that, of course, on a general scale, not so much. The state at all spheres and all levels continues to grapple with, you might have heard, it's said quite often that, work in silos, we need to be cooperating. There is a recognition that we need to be working more collaboratively. However, what we've observed is that there are small pockets of excellence where the recognition is coming that, okay, to recognize that you need to be collaborating, you then also need to navigate an institutional environment that is still designed in a way that manifests in silos. How performance scorecards are designed at the output level. It's very much individual achievement. So achievement by components, and you find that in the planning space as well, and indeed in the implementation space as well. And that our entities achieve by opponents and what one might call a tick box exercise. So there is a need, while there are pockets of excellence, where, for example, in an approach to dealing with substance use and substance abuse in one particular city, they've come up with a really useful collaborative method that brings in drug and substance experts from the academic sector, NGOs that are experts, recognizing that cities, although government is the catalyst and should play the coordinating role, as you mentioned, Cathy, it's not the expert in everything. It doesn't necessarily know everything about what to do in the case of someone who is a substance user. And even internally, creating a mechanism for departments to partner, the city safety department partnering with the health department, partnering with the parks department, because all of these ills take place in city space, right? In our parks, in our pavements. And so there are these pockets of excellence that definitely need the groundswell of support to be scaled up so that they are, the modus operandi, the way that we work. Yes.
All right, Siphelele, let me thank you for your time. A big thank you to all of our guests. Let's take you over to the news desk for the latest news update.